Okay, the shiur is dedicated to Nishmas Rachalei Bas Rav Chaim Tzvi. We're in the middle of discussing the Melacha of Dosh, and in our last year we introduced the topic of Dosh by taking a look at the issue of and the topic of milking cows on Shabbos. So when it comes to milking cows on Shabbos, he showed many different shitos as to what exactly is the nature of the yisur of milking cows. Why is milking cow considered to be yisur? In fact, you find 7 different shitos in Rishonim. What malacha, if any malacha, do you violate when it comes to milking cows on Shabbos? Clearly the dominant shita, as we mentioned, was the view of Rashi and the Rambam, who say that it's an yisur of Melacha of Dosh. However, we saw the Yushalmi, who said it's also because of kotzer. We mentioned the shita Mikubetzis and Ksubos, who says it's also because of gozes. The very striking view of Rabbi Tam, who says it's an isser of memachek. When you go ahead and smooth out the udder, when you milk a cow, you have to smooth out the udder, so that involves smoothing, and that would be an isser. We saw another shita of Rabbi Tam of Borer, a whole slew of shitas, and really what drives the sugya of the isser of milking cows on Shabbos is this major problem we had with Rashi and the Rambam, because when it comes to Melacha of Dosh, the Gemara tells very clearly on Daf Ayin Hey in Masechet Shabbos that ein disha ela b'gdulei karka, that Dosh only operates on something that grows from the ground. And of course, a cow, in the simple view, does not seem to grow in the ground. So how could you violate the yisra of Chaliva mishum Dosh? Chaliva is a tolda, is mafarek, is a tolda of Dosh. How could it be because of Dosh when animals are not considered to be gdulei karka? For that reason, many Rishonim do vie away from the view of Rashi and the Rambam, and don't say it's because of Dosh. After all, a cow is not considered to be gdulei karka. However, the Rashi, Rambam, and how we generally would view it, how the view of most Rishonim is to stick to their guns, and even though in Disha ela b'gdulei karka, milking a cow is still us because of Dosh. What exactly is the rationale then? How could it possibly be? So we saw 2 possibilities, 2 very well-known possibilities, that of the Maggid Mishnah and many other Rishonim who say indeed cows are considered to be gidulei karka for this purpose, even though they don't grow on the ground, but since they're sustained from the ground, that's sufficient to qualify as gidulei karka. Then we saw the view of Rav Avin ben Arambam in the Tshuvas Birchas Avram Siman Yudches, who says that true ein disha el b'gidulei karka, the Av Melacha is limited to gidulei karka. However, the Toda can indeed be things that can be other than gidulei karka, and therefore animals are not called gidulei karka. And even so, you could still be chayav choleg mishum mafar, which is a Toda of Dosh, because there is no requirement in the Tolda that the Tolda be Gidulei Karka, just the Av Melacha has to be Gidulei Karka. Then what we left off discussing is a very difficult shita of the Rabbeinu Tam. The Rabbeinu Tam tells us that the Yisr is one of Memachik. So first of all, that's very difficult, because the Gemara in Masechet Shabbos on Daf Kuf Mem Dalet tells us that when it comes to both squeezing grapes and milking cows, it's mutter to squeeze a grape for the juice into ochel, into food, and it's usher into a mashke, into a liquid. That's the Gemara on Daf Kuf Mem Dalet. And the Gemara says just like that, we find that when it comes to grapes, we also find that when it comes to milking. If you go ahead and milk an animal, so again, into food is going to be mutter, and into an empty dish or into a liquid, that's going to be usher. Sorry, this is Daf Kuf Mem Dalet Amud Beis. What exactly? How could that make sense? After all, if you learn that the yisr is one of Dosh, Schita, Dosh, so then we understand it pretty well. Why? Because after all, when you go ahead and squeeze the animal, the yisr is to extract a liquid from a solid. So when you go ahead and extract a liquid from a solid, and it finds itself in liquid form, you've actually done the Melacha. You've extracted a liquid from a solid, converted that lodged liquid into an escaped liquid, and that indeed is the yisr of mafarek, releasing that liquid. However, if after you do the act of squeezing, the food, the juice, enters into ochel, so now it's lodged into a different food item. It was in a grape, and now it's in some salad. It was in the udder of the milk, now it's in some oats. So then it's still lodged in food. What difference does it make if it's in this food or that food? Either way, the liquid has not been extracted, and thus we would understand very well, if you hold the yisr as one of Dosh, why there should be a difference between extracting a liquid into a food versus into an empty dish. This makes good sense according to Rashi, according to the Ram. Indeed, that's probably what drove their shita. However, according to Rabbeinu Tam, according to all the other Rishonim, what rationale does it make if it's nisr memachek? What difference should it make whether you are milking the cow into a dish that has food in it or doesn't have food in it? Either way, you're engaged in smoothing out the udder. So what difference does it make? You should violate the yisr in any event. That's a very difficult problem, which Tosfos himself asks on the view of Rabbeinu Tam. A second problem that we saw, and this is asked by the Rabbeinu Tam himself, when first of all he seems to change views. This is Rabbeinu Tam and Daf Kuf Mem Daled when Beis Masech Shabbos Dirmasel Cholev Tosas Dirmasel Cholev. First of all, he seems to change positions. All of a sudden now Rabbeinu Tam later on in the Masechet is saying the Yisr of Chaliva is not one of Memachik anymore. Chazar bo. Many Rishonim say, many Achronim say that the Rabbeinu Tam changed his mind and now is operating with a Borer model. He says the Yisr is one of Borer. Okay, that's a side point. But he does say that you still have a problem. Good. Let's say you go ahead and milk a cow into food. So you're not allowed to do that's mutter. The Gemara seems to say that's mutter. Into an empty dish, that's aser. So use the schita into food is going to be okay because it was in food and now it's considered to be in a food. That's okay. You haven't